All right, welcome back to the show. I am very excited about today's episode. Why? Because what we're going to talk about is something that most real estate agents would say is their greatest struggle in their sales business. Certainly, it's probably one of the most common challenges that I'm seeing as a real estate sales coach with agents that I coach, which is this whole idea around defining what a real lead is and what a real lead is not. And we're going to get into it so that when you leave this video today, you have a real understanding of what lead generation means. So when you're talking to prospects and you're prospecting actively and you're having conversations with prospects, how do you know the difference between a prospect, a lead, a real opportunity, a forced opportunity? We're going to talk about all that today. And so let's get into the problem that I see all too often. So like I said before, real estate agents, one of their biggest issues in their business is a lack of qualified leads in their pipeline. Why? It's simply because a lack of lead generation or a lack of proactive prospecting. And so they don't hit their income goal. They're not producing at the levels they want to produce. That is simply a byproduct of having a weak pipeline, not enough quality leads inside that pipeline. And that is a result of a lack of prospecting. So that's the issue. That's the problem. And so what happens is this: as a result, when being the key phrase, when real estate agents prospect, they force prospects with very, very little motivation into their database, into their CRM, and then turn around and call them a lead. Why do real estate salespeople do this? Why do we behave this way? Why do we act this way? Why do we treat a sales business for a business where we think we're collecting leads for some reason? And so many agents do this. I was just talking with a coaching client literally this week, and we were talking about her database. And I said, okay, well, how many prospects or leads do you have inside of your database? And she said, oh, I've got tons. I've got thousands. I said, thousands? You have thousands of leads. And I said, well, if you have thousands of leads, what is the communication plan with the thousands and thousands of people in the database? And her response was all too common, unfortunately. Her response was none, zero. I don't have a communication strategy. I haven't communicated with people in the database for years. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this is the issue. We all hear build a database, build a database, build a database. And without having context that I'm going to give you in today's video, what ends up happening is real estate agents such as yourself, we end up collecting prospects, names and numbers and email addresses in some type of database, call them leads, call it our database when we have no definition, no clarity around what a lead is or what a lead is not. We don't communicate with those people because they're in fact not leads. We just were stuffing people into some database because that's what we thought we had to do, to be fair, because that's what you were taught to do when you got in the industry. And then you wake up in 10 years with thousands of people in this database, none of whom you've communicated with, none of whom have generated any business for yourself, and then we're confused on what the problem is. So when a prospect or when a real estate agent rather starts to prospect, what happens is they start to force prospects that are not qualified in their database. This is the first thing we're going to unpack. And it's because of a scarcity mindset. And what I mean by that is we all know, okay, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse and I'm not going to beat you up too bad on today's video, but the reality is real estate salespeople just aren't doing enough prospecting. So when they prospect, as rare as it is, wink, wink, right? Do more. But when I can get your rear end to do some prospecting, it's so rare that you are prospecting that when you do, if you have the slightest of what you think is a good conversation with a prospect, you're doing anything and everything you can to twist that prospect's arm into finding their way into their database. Instead of what I call not qualifying, I call it disqualifying. Instead of taking a mindset of abundance and saying, listen, I know most of the people I talk to are not a lead. The agent with a scarcity mindset says, they're not saying this consciously, but what the mindset is I don't prospect that often, so I have to force as many of these people that I'm talking to today over the phone into the database because, man, I don't know when I'm going to do this again. You get it? I don't know when I'm going to prospect again. So if I'm going to have 14 conversations this morning, I might find myself forcing these people into the database when there's not real motivation, when there's not a real qualification process, when I haven't clearly defined what an opportunity means to get inside of my database because of this scarcity mindset, where the exact opposite is true for the agent that has an abundant mindset, that prospects on a consistent basis, that their mindset, their outlook is the exact opposite. They say things like this: because I do so much prospecting, because I go on so many appointments, because I list so many homes, because I have such a robust follow-up system, that I have to be careful with what prospects make it into my system. So therefore, I'm going to do some things that ensure my database is of the highest quality, not of the highest quantity. It is not a game of collecting names and numbers and email addresses, because you can talk about having thousands of people in your database of which you never turn into business. So that's the number one issue, is the scarcity mindset. The second thing I wrote down was these agents are afraid to qualify the prospect. Why? Because they're afraid they won't get the answers they're looking for. As an example, all right? So let's pretend you're having a conversation with a prospect. Rather than give or invite the prospect to tell you no, which is what you should be doing as a confident salesperson, because we're not trying to force people into things they don't want to do. So instead of inviting prospects to tell you no, what do? We hide behind the no. We say as little as possible to force a yes as we can because of the scarcity mindset. So we don't want to ask a prospect, well, listen, Mr. Prospect, would it make sense for us to get together, have a conversation about getting your property listed, get it on the market? We don't want to ask a question like that because we're scared they're going to tell us what? No. And we don't want to hear that, because if we do, then what happens as a result? Oh, that's right. We have to do more of what we're trying to avoid, prospect. So I can't, Brandon, ask meaningful conversations or qualifying questions because I don't want to hear the answer. I don't want to find out I don't have a lead because I don't want to do additional prospecting. And if I ask these questions and I find out, wow, I don't really have that many leads, then I'm going to feel overwhelmed. I'm going to feel as though I have to do more prospecting, which is exactly what you need to do. But for the agent who is avoiding prospecting, who only prospects very little, doesn't want to hear the truth. They want to live in what I call the mirage of hope. That, listen, I'm getting all these leads. You're pretending that you're getting results when in reality you're not. So let's talk about the solution then. The solution is that we have to have a clear definition of what a lead is and what it isn't. I share 6 data points with the agents that I coach that I'm going to share with you in today's video. And before we get into those 6, the key thing when prospecting is to do what I just mentioned a minute ago, which is to disqualify, is for you to be as skeptical of prospects as they are of you as the salesperson. So much so that we have equal business stature, that the prospect doesn't have leverage over you, that you have as much to give them as you stand to gain from them. It's an equal relationship, and therefore you need to be as skeptical. You need to be interviewing every prospect the way that they are. You need to be challenging prospects the same way that they are to you. This doesn't mean be rude. This doesn't mean to be pressure. This doesn't mean to be salesy. It doesn't mean any of those things. What it does mean is this. It means that you don't run from no. You don't hide from no. That you actually invite prospects to tell you no. That no is perfectly okay. That you don't twist people's arms into telling you yes when they really have no interest, but you and your fear of rejection is so high that you're not going to ask meaningful questions. You're not going to take any risks because you don't want to find out the truth. So we have to do the exact opposite. We have to invite prospects to tell us no so that we can identify the prospects that have, yes, real motivation to do something. That, yes, you find out the prospects that you do, in fact, have a real opportunity to win their business, and you only find that out by asking them real meaningful questions, by inviting them to reject you. So I'll give you one example, and then I'll break down the 6 data points. So if you're having a conversation with the prospect, you may say something like this. So let's just pretend you're calling a for sale by owner or an expired listing. The amateur, the agent that is scared to hear the truth, tries to set the appointment by beating around the bush about what it is that they're really trying to do, which is to set the appointment to list the property. So they will say things like, let's just call it an expired listing because we're getting so many of them right now. Mr. Prospect, listen, why don't you just let me come over just to take a look at the house, and I'll give you some feedback. That's just an example. That's the agent that has the scarcity mindset because they just want to try to say as little as possible to get into that property. Whereas the agent with an abundant mindset that says it's perfectly fine, Mr. Prospect, if you are not open to interviewing me right now, I don't suppose it would make sense for us to listen, have a conversation, get to know each other, find out if there's something that I might be able to do that your other agent did not, that would result in you getting what you want, which is to get the property sold at a great price. Am I right? That's the difference, right? We're detaching from the outcome, practically speaking, right? That's how we detach for the outcome. And telling prospects, listen, if there is no value, if you don't think that it makes sense for us to get together to have that conversation, that's perfectly okay. But Mr. Prospect, I get the feeling that by meeting, regardless if you end up listing the property with me or not, that you and I might find there's some mutual benefits to at least getting together, having a conversation, exploring the idea of a working relationship. Is that something you'd be open to? Right? And if not, it's perfectly okay. When we communicate with that type of compassion, conviction, confidence, more and more prospects, I think what you're going to find will take you up on that and they will say yes. Okay, so let's give you the 6 data points. This is how we define a lead. This is the most important. Number 1, a lead can only be a lead as a result of you asking for an appointment. A lead can only be a lead as a result of you asking them to meet with you. That's the only way they can become a quality lead, is because we had a conversation and we asked them to get together. That was our intention. Our intention was to make a phone call to set the appointment. Isn't that why we make phone calls? And because they did not give us the appointment for whatever reason, then and only then do we talk about having future conversations with the prospect, which, oh, by the way, we're going to talk about what that conversation sounds like here in just a second. But you cannot have a lead that goes into a database, that goes into a follow-up system, that goes into your CRM without first having a conversation with that prospect about a meeting. Because it's too risky if you don't, that you put non-qualified leads into the database. It's too risky with you having to beat around the bush, not talking about your true intention of meeting with that prospect and earning their business, that they find their way in the database when they should have never been in there in the first place. So the first rule, a lead can only be a lead because you asked for an appointment, you did not get the appointment, and as a result, you and the prospect agreed to next steps. Number 2, a lead can only be a lead because the prospect has true motivation to sell the house. Too many times, even here on the YouTube channel, I get questions all the time. Brandon, what do you say if the prospect says, I don't want to sell my house, or I'm not looking to sell my house? You go to the next lead. You go to the next phone call. Listen, our job is not to convince people to sell their home. It is impossible because people move based on major life events. If you think you can come up with an objection handler to take a random homeowner who has no motivation to sell and you give some fancy sales objection response, and now all of a sudden they are going to pick their family up and move, you are wrong. Our job is to not convince people to sell. Our job is to find people, prospect enough that you talk to people that already want to sell, that you set the appointment with. So we don't spend time, energy, and effort communicating with people that are not motivated to do the thing that our service does, which is to help people buy and sell real estate. So that's number 2. Number 1, a lead can only be a lead because you've asked for an appointment that you didn't get. Number 2 is they have clear motivation. Number 3, they have clear timelines. So you and the prospect have a conversation. Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, ideally, when do you see yourself getting the house on the market and getting it sold? Well, we're in no big rush, okay? Red flag, red flag. You probably have a prospect. You don't have a lead yet. What we're looking for are the people that say, well, we don't know, but ideally, we need to get out of the house probably by the end of the year because the new job starts January 14th. Ding, 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 ding. Now we have more evidence that we might have a real opportunity here. We might have a real seller. We have no interest in dealing with the want-to-be sellers. Everybody would sell their house if they got some ridiculous price. Wouldn't you? That is not what we're looking to do here. So number 1, a lead can only be a lead because you asked for an appointment. Number 2, they have clear motivation. And number 3, they have clear timelines. Number 4, they do not have an agent that they are obligated to do business with. Well, Brandon, how do we know that? You ask. This is one of those qualifying questions that only a strong, confident real estate agent will ask because they're not scared of the answer. So only the agent with a scarcity mindset doesn't even ask the question, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, when the day comes for you to hire a real estate agent, do you have an agent that you're obligated to do business with, or would you find value in potentially meeting with someone like me to interview an agent to see what it is that top agents are doing to list and sell homes? Well, you only ask that question if you're not afraid of the answer. And so we're looking for the answer to say, no, we would be open to meeting with you. We'd be open. We would like to interview you. We'd like to meet with you. Okay, great. More evidence that we have a real prospect, a real lead. But what if you found out, no, I mean, my brother is a real estate agent? Well, you could respond with one more question to say, listen, doesn't surprise me. I'm glad that you brought that up. It doesn't surprise me that you have somebody that you know who is a real estate agent. Most people do. And so let me ask you this. We give a third-party story. There have been a lot of people that I've done business with in the past who are not comfortable mixing their business with selling their home, as intimate as that is, with people that they know. And so I guess before I let you go, can I ask you, are you 100% obligated to work with your brother, or would you find value in having a second opinion to talk to somebody maybe that you aren't as close with? Are you open to the idea of having a second opinion from another agent so that if you end up doing business with your brother, you can have some perspective, right? These are all questions you would ask if you're not afraid of the answer, if you're not afraid of the rejection. And what you might find is the prospect says, well, that's a good point. Yeah, we would be open to interviewing you. We're not obligated to Bob, my brother, or we don't have a real estate agent, but we have to ask. So that is number 4. Number 5 is the prospect agrees to a future conversation versus you forcing a future conversation. So let me explain what I mean. Here's what too many amateur salespeople are doing. They're on a phone call with a prospect, and the conversation is going, many different directions, and maybe the prospect has some resistance, and so the agent feels that resistance, and the prospect says, or the agent says something like this. They say, okay, Mr. Prospect, listen, I know you're not looking to sell right now, so would it be okay if I just, maybe I stayed in touch with you from time to time, and listen, if things change, feel free to call me, but I'll stay in touch with you, okay? And the prospect says, okay, not okay from the place of agreement, but the place of I'm glad this conversation is over and I have no motivation to ever pick up the phone when that person calls me again. So much so that prospect goes into what we call voicemail jail, or better yet, the witness protection program, and you never hear from them again. And you say, Brandon, what did I do wrong? I'll tell you what you did wrong. You forced a future conversation versus inviting the prospect to have a future conversation where they drove the future conversation. So let me give an example, practically speaking. What I mean by that is this. Instead of ending a call the way that I just showed you, what you will want to do is something different that could sound like this. Mr. Prospect, I don't suppose it would even make sense for us to stay in communication in the future. I don't suppose it would make sense for maybe you and I to have another conversation in a few months from now, would it? You invite the prospect to say, yep, nope, not interested. Only the real lead, the real prospect says, no, yeah, that'd be fine. Why don't you follow up with me closer to the end of the year and then we could talk about getting together? Ding, 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 ding. Isn't that what we're looking for? It's the prospect inviting you to stay in touch, not you forcing to stay in touch. Make sense? Cool. That's number 5. And then number 6, they give you a valid email address. So think about this. Only a real seller is going to give you a real email address, right? That's another red flag. If they don't give you an email address to stay in touch, where they won't let you send your pre-listing packet, they won't let you send your resume. No, I don't want to give you my email address. Well, potentially that's not a real lead. You haven't qualified it enough, because only someone who is open to doing business with another person feels comfortable sharing contact information. So let's recap. Number 1, a lead can only be a lead because you've asked for an appointment. Number 2, they have clear motivation. Number 3, they have clear timelines. Number 4, they don't have another agent that they're obligated to work with. Number 5, the prospect agrees to a future conversation. They invite you to stay in touch. And then number 6, they give you a valid email address. These are all the things you have to consider when you are prospecting and building a pipeline. So if any of that made sense at all, I'm not suggesting that it did, but if it did, and you want help to implement this, let's have a conversation about potentially a coaching relationship between you and I. I'll put a link beneath this video. Feel free to click it. You can schedule time to talk with us. We'll walk you through how our coaching program works, and then you can decide if you want to participate in that or not. And if not, it is perfectly okay. I am just hoping that you get value here from the daily content here on the YouTube channel. If there is future content that you want me to make and you find yourself struggling with one area of the business, you want me to make a video on it here on the daily show, I would be happy to do so. Just put a comment beneath this video. Appreciate your time, your attention. I hope you got something from it, and we'll see you guys in another video very soon.